The envelope was small, cream-colored, and unassuming, but the words inside struck me like a hammer to the chest. "No one's coming to your wedding. Deal with it." My hands shook as I read the scrawled handwriting I had known since childhood, my parents' handwriting, now transformed into a weapon I couldn't anticipate. I stared at the note again, as if seeing it for the first time. The ink seemed darker, heavier, carrying the weight of decades of judgment, disappointment, and cold indifference. My stomach twisted, a knot of betrayal tightening with every heartbeat. I should have felt anger, but instead, there was numbness, a hollow emptiness spreading through me like ink dissolving in water. The envelope had no signature, no apology, just a finality that felt like exile. They weren't coming. My parents, the people who had told me for years that family is everything, who had praised my every achievement, were now strangers delivering a verdict on my happiness. The note wasn't alone. Inside the envelope, there was a folded photograph of me as a little girl, sitting on their laps, smiling, eyes bright and full of trust. I traced the edges with trembling fingers, wondering if they remembered this day at all, or if it was just another reminder of the family I had never truly had. They had become masters of conditional love, praising me when I followed their rules, punishing me when I stepped out of line. And now, even my wedding, a day that was supposed to be about joy and love, had become another battlefield. The apartment felt suffocating. The air was thick with memories, the scent of my mother's floral perfume lingering faintly in the corners, the hum of the city outside muffled by closed blinds. I sank onto the couch, the note clutched in my hand like a lifeline I no longer trusted. My fiancé, Adam, had been so excited, so full of ideas, plans, hope, and now I couldn't even look at him without the sting of shame and betrayal burning behind my eyes. I remembered the countless times I had tried to please them, the extra tutoring sessions, the long hours at a job I didn't love, the sacrifices I had made to meet their expectations. And for what? So they could deliver this final, cutting blow? The tears came suddenly, hot and unbidden, spilling over my cheeks as I whispered to the empty room. How could they? Adam found me hours later, curled up on the couch, the envelope torn open beside me. He didn't ask. He just sat next to me, pulling me into a tight embrace, his own worry reflected in the deep lines of his face. "We'll figure this out," he said, his voice steady, though I knew he was angry too. "They don't get to ruin this. Not us. Not us together." I wanted to believe him, but the truth lingered like smoke in my lungs. I had spent my life bending and shaping myself into what they wanted. And in return, they had given me disdain, judgment, and now, absence on the most important day of my life. The betrayal cut deeper than any argument or disagreement I had ever known. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the apartment, staring at the wedding invitations, the floral arrangements, the tiny golden bells Adam had insisted we hang as decoration. Everything felt surreal, suspended in a nightmare where love and family were interchangeable only in their absence. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "We're disappointed. We expected better from you." It wasn't even about the wedding. It was about me, as it always had been. I felt something inside me break, a fracture that had been forming since childhood but had never fully revealed itself. And in that moment, a strange clarity emerged. I could either crumble under their disdain, or I could stop giving them the power to hurt me. The next morning, I made a decision. I packed an overnight bag, leaving the note and photograph on the kitchen counter, like a silent tombstone for a family that had stopped being one. I called Adam and told him to meet me at the train station. Without another word, I stepped into the cold dawn, leaving behind the apartment that had held so many memories of pain masked as love. On the train, the city blurred past the window. The sky was a pale gray, clouds heavy with unshed rain. I felt a strange exhilaration mingled with fear. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the fall was inevitable, but the landing unknown. And somewhere deep inside, a fire sparked, an ember I hadn't realized was waiting, dormant but alive, ready to ignite. I decided I wasn't going to beg for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to pretend that their absence mattered more than my own happiness. The world outside my window was vast, full of possibilities I had ignored while I had been trapped in their web of expectations. I promised myself that I would live for me, not for them. I would claim the life I deserved. But freedom, I quickly realized, came with its own complications. My phone buzzed again, this time with a series of cryptic messages from distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Your parents are worried. Think carefully about your decisions. Each message felt like a shadow trying to pull me back into the same suffocating cage I had just escaped. And in the midst of it, a new, sharper question emerged. Could I truly start over when the people who had shaped every part of my life were still out there, watching, judging, ready to strike again? I arrived at the small countryside in where Adam had arranged our temporary stay. The smell of wet earth and pine was unfamiliar, yet comforting in a way the city never was. As I unpacked, I noticed the envelope still clutched in my coat pocket, and I felt a strange urge to burn it, to erase every word, every memory, every wound it had inflicted. But instead, I placed it carefully on the bedside table. Not to destroy it, but to confront it. To face the hurt and make it powerless. That evening, Adam held my hands across the table at a quiet-in restaurant, his eyes searching mine. You don't have to forgive them, he said softly, but you need to protect yourself. That's the first step. His words were steady, grounding, yet I could feel the tension in my chest, the lingering fear that this fight wasn't over. And as the candlelight flickered across the walls, a thought struck me like a lightning bolt. If they thought this note would break me, they had no idea what they had awakened. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows like a warning, and I realized that whatever came next, reconciliation, revenge, or liberation, it would not be dictated by them. It would be mine. But just as I allowed myself a flicker of hope, a sudden knock on the door startled me. Adam frowned, but I stood, heart racing. When I opened it, a stranger was there, holding an envelope similar to the one my parents had sent. And I knew, in that instant, that this was only the beginning. The stranger didn't speak. He just handed me the envelope, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of a dark hat. The weight of it felt heavier than the first one, as if it carried not just words, but decades of unspoken truths. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal, a chill crawling up my spine. Inside was a letter, typed neatly, with a single line underlined at the top. You've been lied to all your life. Some truths are not meant for the faint of heart. I blinked, trying to steady my breath. The note went on to describe things I had never suspected, hidden debts, secret agreements, whispers of betrayals I had only glimpsed in passing. It wasn't just my parents' absence at my wedding, it was part of a much larger scheme, a manipulation that had begun long before I was even born. I sank into the chair, the letter shaking in my hands. My mind raced. Could this really be true? Could the people who had claimed to love me, who had defined every moment of my life, really have plotted my misery from the start? Each word burned like acid, corroding the foundation of every memory I had ever trusted. Adam sat beside me, silent but alert, sensing the storm building inside me. What does it say? He asked softly. I swallowed hard. It says they weren't just rejecting me at the wedding. There's more. They've been manipulating things my whole life. Lies, hidden debts, even people I thought I could trust, they weren't who they seemed. He placed his hand over mine. We'll face it together. Whatever it is, we'll find a way through it. His calm strength anchored me, but the fire of anger inside me was no longer just simmering. It was roaring. I wanted answers. I wanted justice. I wanted the truth, no matter how devastating. The next morning I started digging. I called old family friends, scoured public records, and pieced together fragments of conversations that had once seemed inconsequential. What emerged was shocking. My parents had not only favored my sister in every tangible way, money, property, social connections, but they had actively undermined my achievements. Scholarships that should have been mine were quietly diverted. Promotions I had earned were subtly blocked. And worse, some of the people I had loved and trusted, mentors, family friends, even distant relatives, had been complicit. The betrayal made my chest ache, a constant, gnawing pain. I thought about confronting them directly, about calling them and demanding explanations, but I knew it would accomplish nothing. They thrived on control, on my obedience. Confrontation would only give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Instead, I decided to fight differently. I needed leverage. I needed proof. I contacted a private investigator, a woman named Selma, whose reputation for uncovering buried truths was unmatched. Within days, she had dug up financial records, hidden correspondence, and documents proving that my parents had been quietly siphoning money and opportunities away from me, funneling them to my sister. Every revelation felt like a punch to the gut. I realized the enormity of the lies I had lived under. But there was a sting beyond financial betrayal. My parents had also manipulated relationships. Adam had been warned against me by distant relatives, friends had been subtly steered away, and even my closest confidants had been influenced to doubt me. I had walked through life believing I was alone in my struggles, when in reality, my every step had been guided or obstructed by invisible hands. I felt the walls of my small in-room close in. Anger, grief, and disbelief tangled into a knot I could barely breathe through. And yet, amidst the chaos, a quiet determination began to rise. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let their manipulation dictate the rest of my life. It was in that moment that a new thought struck me, terrifying yet exhilarating. Revenge. Not the petty kind that destroys for the sake of destruction, but the kind that reclaims power, exposes truth, and forces accountability. I could use everything I had learned, the secrets, the evidence, the network of people they thought were loyal, to build a future free of their interference. But revenge required patience. It required strategy. And more than anything, it required courage, the kind of courage I hadn't realized I possessed until now. I began making plans, small at first, reaching out to people my parents had wronged, quietly gathering allies who were willing to stand against their deception. Each day, my resolve strengthened. Meanwhile, the wedding day loomed closer. Adam and I had postponed the ceremony initially, but the thought of canceling entirely made me nauseous. I wanted to celebrate love, even if my parents refused to attend. I wanted to show them that my life didn't revolve around their approval, that I could thrive, that I could choose joy, even in the shadow of their betrayal. Then came the final twist I hadn't anticipated. A call from my sister. Her voice was hesitant, almost trembling. I don't know if you know, she said, but they've been using me too. They've lied to both of us. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be true? Could the person I had thought was my rival, my enemy, have been as trapped as I was? We agreed to meet somewhere neutral, away from the eyes of our parents. Sitting across from her at a quiet cafe, I realized that the anger I had carried for years might not have been mine alone. It was a shared burden. She told me things I hadn't imagined, how she had been manipulated into thinking she was the favored child, how she had been pressured to compete with me, how guilt and fear had kept her from reaching out sooner. It was surreal, standing there with the person who had been both my competitor and my sister, realizing that we had been victims together. The thought struck me like a lightning bolt. Perhaps the only way to defeat our parents' control was together. As we left the cafe, I felt a strange mixture of hope and apprehension. We now had knowledge, strategy, and even tentative trust between us. But the question remained, how far would we have to go to reclaim the life that had been stolen from us? And, more importantly, how much darkness would we have to confront in the process? That night, back at the inn, I couldn't sleep. I stared out at the moonlit countryside, the wind rattling the windows like a warning, and my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. They're watching. Every step. Every move. You're closer than you think. I froze. The feeling of being hunted, manipulated, and cornered returned with terrifying clarity. My pulse quickened. My sister's hand hovered over mine as we read the message together. In that moment, I realized that our battle was only beginning, and that it was going to be far more dangerous and complicated than we had imagined. The envelope, the lies, the betrayals, they had awakened something fierce inside me. But whether it would protect us or destroy us, I didn't yet know. The wind rattled the windows like a restless spirit, a reminder that the storm outside mirrored the one raging inside me. The message had left a chill I couldn't shake. Someone was watching. Every call I made, every step I took, every plan I drafted with my sister. Yet, for the first time in my life, fear didn't paralyze me. It sharpened me. It made me ruthless in my clarity. My sister, Zara, had become an unexpected ally. We were no longer just sisters in name, forced into a lifetime of competition by manipulative parents. We were partners in survival, strategists in reclaiming our stolen lives. That realization fueled a fire I didn't know existed, a determination to confront the people who had treated us as pawns in their game. We began with evidence, everything Selma, the investigator, had uncovered. Hidden bank accounts, falsified records, letters, and photographs that exposed their manipulations. I felt a cold satisfaction as I compiled it all into a dossier, knowing that each page was a weapon. Each revelation stripped them of the power they had wielded over me for years. Then came the confrontation. We returned to the city under the pretense of family matters. I stood outside the house I had once called home, the same house that now felt like a mausoleum of memories I no longer trusted. The air smelled faintly of my mother's perfume and dust, a scent that should have been comforting, but now only reminded me of deceit. I rang the doorbell. My heart thumped like a war drum. When the door opened, my parents' expressions froze, a flicker of surprise, quickly masked by disdain. "You're here," my father said, voice tight. My mother's eyes flicked to Zara and me, searching, calculating. "I'm here," I said steadily, holding Zara's hand, "to finish what you started." The conversation began with accusations. Years of lies, betrayal, and manipulation were laid bare in words I had once been too polite to speak. I watched their faces, noting the subtle twitch of guilt in my father's jaw, the flash of unease in my mother's eyes. They had always believed that control equaled power, that I would crumble if confronted. But I didn't. I was standing tall, unwavering, and the confidence radiating from me seemed to crack their carefully constructed facade. "You think this changes anything?" My mother snapped, but her voice faltered. The words had lost their sting. "Yes," I replied, feeling a weight lift from my chest. "It changes everything. Because I am no longer your pawn. I am no longer living for your approval. And I will not let you dictate my life." The final blow came when I presented the dossier. The evidence of their secret manipulations, the financial schemes, the lies told to every adult who had shaped my life. It was undeniable. They were silent, mouths open slightly, the reality of exposure finally sinking in. But this was not just about revenge. It was about liberation. My sister and I weren't trying to destroy them. We were reclaiming ourselves. Each piece of evidence was a key to our freedom, a declaration that we would no longer be silenced or controlled. The confrontation didn't end in tears or shouting. It ended in stunned silence. For the first time, they saw us, not as children, not as pawns, but as women who had survived and thrived despite them. And in that silence, I felt a sense of triumph, not in cruelty, but in empowerment. Afterward, Zara and I walked away from the house together. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the streets. We didn't look back. The city felt different now, alive with possibility rather than suffocating expectation. We had confronted the past, and in doing so, we had claimed our future. The wedding, which had once seemed like a battlefield, now became a symbol of victory. Adam and I decided to celebrate it quietly, surrounded by friends and allies who had supported us, without condition. There were no empty seats, no silent disapproval. There was only love, laughter, and the intoxicating feeling of choosing happiness on our own terms. That night, as I stood under the soft glow of string lights, watching Adam smile at me, I realized something profound. True strength wasn't about fighting them. It was about surviving, thriving, and refusing to let their control define my worth. Every betrayal, every hidden manipulation, every cruel note from the past had led me here, to a place where I could finally breathe freely. Zara came up behind me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "We did it," she said softly, a hint of awe in her voice. "We're free." "Yes," I whispered, feeling tears sting my eyes, but this time they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of triumph. And nothing they say or do can ever take this away from us. But life has a way of testing even the strongest resolve. Just as I let myself relax, a new message appeared on my phone. I froze, heart tightening. It was from an unknown number. "This isn't over. Watch your back. You've awakened something that can't be controlled." I looked at Adam and Zara, their faces mirroring my unease. But instead of fear, a new sensation surged through me: anticipation. I had faced betrayal, manipulation, and emotional ruin, and I had survived. Whatever came next, I knew I could handle it. I had grown stronger than the people who had tried to break me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was living fully and unapologetically. I had reclaimed my life from the shadows of those who had tried to control it. I had learned that family isn't always blood, and approval isn't a measure of worth. True strength comes from standing up, facing the darkness, and refusing to let it define you. The wind outside whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of endless possibility. I smiled, letting it fill me. We were free, free from manipulation, free from fear, free to live our lives on our own terms. And though the future might hold challenges, I now knew one truth above all: nothing could break me again. As I watched the lights of the city flicker in the distance, I thought about that first note, the one that had shattered me. How strange it was that the words meant to destroy me had, in the end, ignited the fire that saved me. I had turned pain into power, betrayal into clarity, and absence into liberation. I took a deep breath, feeling the crisp night air fill my lungs, and whispered to the world, "This is my life, and I choose it." And somewhere deep inside, I knew that no note, no threat, no hidden truth could ever take that choice away from me.